All right. So recession again, kind of starting it out. GDP goes negative. Unemployment goes, let's call it north of 4.5. Probably it rips probably higher than 4.5 so quickly. Talking quarters, not years. Um, what happens then?
Yeah, and I think that there's some evidence that you could easily point to say this is playing out right now. And again, we are certainly not in a recession at this point, but directionally moving towards a recession. So we just had 5.2 GDP growth for the third quarter. Right now, the Atlanta Fed is projecting somewhere between 1.2 and 1.4 for
Yeah,
GDP growth for the
I was
fourth
just gonna
quarter.
check. So that's interesting because I knew it had to come down because last week's, I forget what it was, manufacturing or something number was really weak because
Correct.
it was 2.4. Now it's 1.2. So yeah, we are definitely seeing what disinflation or whatever, a deceleration in growth. So
Yeah, yeah, and you're also seeing unemployment pick up. So, we talked about things like the Solemn Rule, and admittedly, I had never heard of that, and now you brought it up, and I've heard it in 15 places since. So, credit to you for
yes,
that. So, yeah, so you're seeing unemployment pick up. We're still at very modest unemployment rates. I would call it fully employed from an
oh yeah,
economic
for
standpoint.
sure,
You still
for
have
sure.
many more job openings than you have people looking for jobs. So, we're still in a tight labor market, but you have seen every single, not every single, but the trend line is absolutely higher for 2023 from an unemployment rate standpoint. And
Yeah,
as you know, Michael, because you're such an economist, unemployment starts to tick up and then it gaps up if we do
yeah,
go into recession. And it's something where it looks like, oh, things aren't that bad. Like I see the trend going up a little bit, and then all of a sudden, kind of the floor falls out onto the jobs market and unemployment
yeah.
pops.
Yeah, well, last thing to say from an economic perspective is this the last domino to fall every time? And
Correct.
to that
Correct.
end, I don't know if you saw it this morning, but Spotify announced, I think it was a 12 or 15% reduction in headcount. And,
Yeah.
that reminds me of Amazon and Google well over a year ago, right? So
Yeah.
there
And that's
still are
exactly
companies right sizing.
sorry to cut you off. I didn't mean to. That's exactly what why those Magnificent Seven stocks have done so well this year, and some of that tech sector in general. What they had was the come to Jesus moment. They spent like drunken sailors in 2021, 2022,
Mhm.
massively expanding their workforce, and then obviously in 2022, that huge spend came with a massive downward movement in their stock prices, and then in 2023, coming into the year, the biggest namesake for this would be Meta, where they said, okay, we're going to slow down the metaverse and not spend their like absolute bonkers bananas that they had been. The behavior was just bad there. And so they cut expenses massively. And what happens was their margins widened out. It wasn't
Yeah.
some massive
Shocking.
increase. Yeah,
Shocking.
exactly. But it wasn't, what kind of, I want to make sure everyone's aware of, it wasn't some massive increase in top line revenue. It was
No.
the fact that they had cut expenses to the bone on the back end and had that come to Jesus moment. And so, again, I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but that's the point. I'll
Well,
stop
I
if you
think you're
need to get
going
back
with
on
this
track.
is the Magnificent Seven. Maybe let's even say the top 10 or 15 tech companies got ahead of the curve.
Yep.
And to your point, is I think you're making is maybe there's more Spotify's to come.
Right. Right.
And I think you're right. I think there's more companies looking at their end of year Q4 pipeline revenue and going, wow, 2024 is going to be a hard year. We've got a right size. And dude, I went through this. I remember sitting in a conference room with a spreadsheet, had names going, I got to cut, 15% of these people.
Yeah.
That was one of the worst days of my career. Hated that.
Just feeling like a
Uh,
grim reaper, I'm sure.
oh yeah, because it's just don't look forward to that. All right, so again, recession, and what happens, right? The Fed has to cut, right? I mean, the
The
Fed
Fed
just
has to
has to
cut.
cut.
Yep, the Fed has to cut, and they cut aggressively. So generally during a recession, what you have is 300 basis points in reduction on average in Fed funds rate. So now
And
the speed of
the
that,
first
obviously,
cut, the first cut is not a quarter usually. It's
correct. Correct. And so this is all this is all dependent upon, hey, how vicious is the upward movement in unemployment? How bad does the GDP trajectory look? Right. Are we a train that hits a wall? Are we a train that slows down really quickly and
right.
reverses course slowly? And that will depend on how quickly they decrease interest rates. But 300 basis points historically is peak to trough how much movement you get on interest rates throughout the cycle of a recession.